Hi, my name is Brandon and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. I first started drinking because I liked the way it made me feel. Period. End of story. There's a lot of different reasons I could give about how it made social situations a little easier, helped me fit into the kind of social circles that I wanted to be involved in. But the bottom line is, I liked the way it made me feel. The reasons I kept drinking were related to that, but it got more complicated as time went on, to the point where I was using drinking to get over things that hurt inside me and to deal with those things. So today I want to talk a little bit about how I deal with those things now, because we're still in active recovery. We're still going to hurt inside. And so the question is, well, how do we deal with that hurt and not go back to drinking when we experience it? So I'm going to read some from A New Pair of Glasses by Chuck C. He talks a lot about this. Has a great paragraph here on page 132 that I'm going to read. He says, "How am I going to stay sober? I have to be sober. Sobriety and life are synonymous. How am I going to stay sober? I'm going to perform so that I'm comfortable right here inside me. That's the only way I can stay sober. When I get to feeling a certain way right here, I get drunk. Now, I hear many people say that if you've been in Alcoholics Anonymous a while, you have to think to drink. I don't believe it. I don't think you have to do anything but quit doing the things that keep you comfortable right here. And you wake up drunk because you see, you and I know a way to stop that big hurt. And if we allow it to hurt like it used to hurt, we'll be just as drunk as we were in the old days. And we don't have to think about it at all. Just quit doing the things that keep us comfortable right here." So in this passage, the part that jumped out at me that made me want to talk about this morning is when he says, if we allow it to hurt like it used to hurt. And that really meant a lot to me, because I used to allow myself to hurt. I used to allow myself to feel terrible about both myself and my life and the people around me and my circumstances and everything that was happening to me. And then I would turn to alcohol and drugs to help me cope with those feelings, to help mask those feelings, numb those feelings, whatever you want to call it. In my recovery, I can't allow that hurt to happen. I can't wallow in my own misery. That's really what I've had to get in the habit of avoiding, is getting in that place where I just let myself feel that pain. Because what I've learned in recovery is that there are specific ways for me, specific actions for me to take when I'm feeling that kind of pain. When I'm feeling the kind of hurt that used to really bother me, that used to really be what drove me to get drunk or to get really high or to just try to escape from the world. There are actions I can take and that I need to take in my recovery in order to get back to a place where I'm comfortable in here. Because when I'm comfortable in here, I can stay sober. So I just wrote down before recording the video this morning, I just wrote down a few of those things that I used to feel in my addiction. Things like resentment. I used to be full of resentments. And for those of you working a 12-step program, you know that resentments are one of the biggest things that we address in our program. I used to be full of resentments, just angry at the world and the people in it. And the solution that I had for that in the past was to think of all these different ways that those people needed to change. And sometimes I'd tell them about it, and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I just kept it to myself and was passive aggressively, nasty to them. So resentments, I used to just think of all the different ways that these other people or things that I had no control over needed to change in order to make me more comfortable. If I had self-pity, I didn't really do a lot about self-pity. I just wallowed in it. I tried to think my way out of it, and that never helped. It's hard to logic your way out of these feelings. It's hard to think about, oh, how am I going to get out of self-pity? It's just something that for me, it was easiest to wallow in. Envy. When I used to envy people, same thing. I just wallow in it. I couldn't think my way out of it. If I had a fear of something, I denied it or came up with a reason why it was reasonable fear. And loneliness, I just, chalked that up to my resentments and said, well, other people are assholes. Why would I want to be around them? And just kept isolating. And all of this led to the biggest hurt of all for me, which was sadness and depression. And so in my recovery, these feelings don't just go away. They're not just magically lifted from me. You may meet people in recovery who claim that they've had that happen, and that is wonderful for them, but that has not been my experience. In my experience, resentment, self-pity, envy, fear, loneliness, sadness, depression, these feelings still happen to me. And I'm fine with that because that's part of the human experience. The difference is that I am acting differently when they do happen than I did in my addiction. So, for example, when I get a resentment, one of the things that I learned in my program in Alcoholics Anonymous was to look for my part in it. And that's a huge part of things. And I'll give you an easy example. I'm on the highway and the person in front of me slams on their brakes. The old me would be so upset with that person. And how could they slam on their brakes? What were they doing? What were they thinking? The recovery Brandon says, well, I was the one who was following too closely behind them. That's my part in this. Maybe they should have done something different, but really, if I hadn't been following so closely behind them slamming on their brakes wouldn't have even affected me. And then that resentment, there is no resentment. There's just well, what can I do different next time? I'll do that. And so it's like that with any situation where I develop a resentment. Self-pity. This is another one that's big for me, feeling self-pitiful. And the actions that I take related to that are twofold. One, find gratitude. And I try to keep my gratitude very close to my heart. I say prayers of gratitude at the beginning and end of every day. I think a lot about the things that I'm grateful for in life. And then two, if I'm feeling self-pitiful, helping another person, trying to find another person who might need help. Even if it's as easy, even if it's as simple as, unloading the dishwasher, walk downstairs and see my wife unloading the dishwasher and say, hey, go put your feet up for a second. Let me finish this up. Even something as simple as that can sometimes be enough to lift me out of that mode of self-pity. What about envy? If I envy someone else for what they have or what they've accomplished, that's where I really get hit, is people who have accomplished what I view as more than I have. I get envious of them. Instead of wallowing in that envy, I ask questions now. I express and feel a genuine curiosity. Well, how did you do that? What did you do to get there? And then if they give me some valuable information that might be indicative of something that I should change in my own life, then I can make some changes and maybe benefit from their experience. There's something to be grateful for. Fear. If I have fear about something, I don't just wallow in it or come up with an excuse why it's justified. I talk to another addict in recovery about it, a spiritual advisor, a sponsor, or just a friend, and express what my fears are. But I put them out in the light because Fear is like mushrooms. It grows in the dark. And as soon as you put it in the light, it starts to dry up and shrivel up, and it becomes a lot easier to deal with and a lot easier to dispose of. Loneliness. There is no excuse for loneliness in recovery, especially in the modern age. You can get on a meeting anytime, anywhere, and that you have an internet connection. And in most cities, there's meetings every day. And so for loneliness, I go to a meeting and stick around to talk to people afterwards and tell them I'm feeling lonely. That's the other thing. You got to cop to what you're feeling. You got to say, hey, I'm feeling this way. I need some help. And you'll be surprised exposing yourself like that to other people, saying, hey, this is the way I'm feeling. That's how you open yourself up to receive help from others. And someday, hopefully, someone will do the same thing, have the same kind of needs, and they'll open themselves up to you, and you will have the experience you need to help them out. And finally, if I do all of this stuff, then the likelihood that I slip into sadness or depression is so minimized, because all of these feelings that I talked about, this is the stuff that led into my sadness and depression. This is the stuff that got me there. And I kind of think of sadness and depression as this meta feeling that's just total feeling of discontent and hopelessness that it's ever going to change. That's the depression that I felt. And if I take action on these feelings instead of just wallowing in them, then I don't get to that depressed point. I don't get to that point where I feel hopelessness, because I know what actions I can take to make things better in my life. So that's it for today. I hope you have a great day, and I'll be back here tomorrow with more.